Mr. Speaker, I now yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from North Carolina, Ms. Pittenger, the sponsor of this legislation.
The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for as much time as he shall consume.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 3240, the Regulation D Study Act. This bill is simple. It directs the Government Accountability Office, GAO, to study the regulatory impact on depository institutions, consumers, and monetary policy. Current regulations limit common, online, and automated transfers and withdrawals from non-transaction accounts, such as savings accounts, to only 6 transfers per month. The regulators who created this rule never envisioned online banking and modern banking technology. And because only some transactions are subject to the 6 per month restriction and others are without limit, this rule is very confusing to consumers. Today, many families use online banking tools to actively manage their finances with unnecessary restrictions from these outdated rules. Regulation D requirements force financial institutions to focus on compliance concerns rather than spending more time with their consumers to meet their financial needs. This is common sense legislation that is not only good for financial institutions, but for American families as well. The issue of allowing only 6 transfers per month for certain bank accounts has been reviewed in several decades. With new technological advancements in online banking, we owe it to hardworking American families to revisit this regulation. H.R. 3240 enjoys support from the Credit Union National Association and the National Association of Federal Credit Unions, whose financial institutions serve millions of Americans. Mr. Speaker, I'd also like to submit for the record a letter of support from the President of the Credit Union National Association, which serves 100 million members across the country. As technology advances, we need to make sure federal regulations keep pace. Former Federal Reserve Chairman Bernanke has said that account reserve balances far exceed the level of reserve requirements, and the level of reserve requirements thus plays only a minor role in the daily implementation of monetary policy. We can continue to protect the financial system while allowing families more flexibility to use online banking tools. This legislation has strong bipartisan support, and I would like to thank my colleague on the Financial Services Committee, Congresswoman Maloney from New York, for joining me in introducing H.R. 3240. A GAO study will allow an objective assessment of whether the rarely changed monetary reserves imposed on depository institutions and consumers are necessary in order for the Federal Reserve to implement monetary policy in the 21st century.
New York is recognized for as much time as she shall consume.
Thank you. I thank the gentlelady for her leadership and yielding. And Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 3240, and I am pleased to have worked on this bill with my colleague, Mr. Pittenger. I'd also like to take this opportunity to compliment his work on attempting to end terrorism, cracking down on terrorism financing in our country. The purpose of this particular bill is to study the current monthly limits under Regulation D on the number of automatic withdrawals from a consumer's savings account. Currently, Regulation D limits the number of automatic withdrawals from a consumer's account to 6 per month. This means that if a consumer has already hit his limit on automatic withdrawals for the month and then overdrafts his or her checking account, the bank won't transfer money from his savings account to cover the overdraft, and this results in an unnecessary overdraft fee. As 2 recent studies from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau have noted, overdraft fees disproportionately harm those of us who can least afford it. Unsophisticated consumers are most hit by them. So if there's a regulation that is causing unnecessary overdraft fees, we should study whether that regulation is necessary. That is what our common sense bill does. It asks the GAO to study the limitation in Regulation D to determine if it is in fact useful or harmful. This bill is supported by many stakeholders in financial services, the Credit Union National Association, the National Association of Federal Credit Unions, and the American Bankers Association. I urge my colleagues to support this common sense bill, and I appreciate the help of my colleague, and I yield back the balance.